Have you ever trusted someone so much that you believed they could never betray you? That's how I felt about my sister. She was my protector, my best friend, the one who always held my hand when we crossed the street. But one evening, standing on the crowded platform of a train station, she decided to turn that trust into a game. With a mischievous laugh, she told me to wait while she just went to get something. I stood there, my small backpack hanging loosely on my shoulders, watching the trains come and go. Minutes passed, then hours. She never came back. At first, I thought it was a joke. I believed she would jump out from behind a corner, laughing, and hug me tight. But when the station lights dimmed and strangers' faces blurred into shadows, the truth began to hit me like a cold wave. She had left me? For a child, 10 years is an eternity. I learned to survive without her, to grow without the warmth of family, to harden myself against the world. I carried her laughter in my head, but it turned bitter, a ghost of betrayal that haunted me.
She had walked away, and I promised myself
I would never look back. Yet fate has a way of weaving broken threads together. 10 years later, she found me, and when her tear-streaked face appeared before me, begging for forgiveness, I had to decide, do I embrace the sister who abandoned me? Or do I finally close the door on the past forever? The last time I saw my sister before everything changed, the air was thick with the scent of roasted peanuts and diesel smoke, the kind of smell that clung to train stations. I was 12, still small enough to believe the world was safe because she was standing beside me. Her hand was warm in mine, her laughter rising above the roar of the trains, sharp and playful, like it always was. She had promised me that afternoon would be an adventure. Just follow me, she said, tugging me through the bustling crowd. The station was alive with travelers, vendors calling out for attention, and the constant screech of metal against metal. I remember staring up at her, my heart light with trust, thinking there was nothing she could do to hurt me. We stood near the edge of the platform, trains rushing in and out, people shoving past us with bags and hurried voices. She leaned close, her hair brushing my cheek, and whispered, "Wait right here. I'll be back in a minute." I nodded without hesitation. That was my sister. She had always taken the lead, always teased, always made me feel like I was part of her secret world. I believed her without question. She slipped into the crowd, her figure vanishing among the blur of faces, and I stayed rooted to the spot like a loyal shadow. I told myself she'd return quickly, grinning at her own little trick, maybe holding a candy or some small surprise for me. Minutes passed. I shifted from one foot to the other, watching every direction for her return. The crowd thinned and thickened again as trains came and went. People brushed against me, their voices strange and sharp, speaking in accents I didn't fully understand. The clock high on the wall ticked louder with each passing moment. 10 minutes! 20. My chest tightened. But I told myself she was probably lost in the crowd, maybe delayed buying something. I waited, clutching the strap of my little backpack, as if holding it tighter would keep me calm. The sun began to sink, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. I searched the faces of strangers, scanning for the familiar curve of her jaw, the swing of her hair, the sound of her laugh. Nothing. My feet ached, but I didn't move from the spot where she had left me. "She'll come back," I whispered, under my breath. She promised. That word promise was the only thing holding me together. By the time the station lights flickered on, fear had seeped deep into me, heavy and cold. Vendors packed up their stalls, their cheerful shouts replaced with mutters and yawns. The crowd grew thinner. I was small, invisible among the hurried adults. Some glanced at me, a child standing alone, but none stopped. I hugged my backpack against my chest and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. My sister's prank wasn't funny anymore. It was cruel, frightening. The shadows stretched across the platform, and still she didn't return. A woman with tired eyes paused to ask me if I was lost. Her words were kind, but my voice refused to work. I shook my head, terrified that if I admitted the truth, it would make everything real that my sister had left me, that she wasn't coming back. The woman patted my shoulder, gave me a faint smile, and walked away. I wanted to scream for her, to stay, to help me, but the words were locked inside me. Hours blurred together. The loudspeaker announced trains I no longer cared about. I sat on a cold metal bench, swinging my legs back and forth, trying to stay awake.
My stomach growled.
With hunger, but I had no money. I kept replaying the moment in my head, her smile, her promise to return. Maybe she had gotten lost? Maybe she was playing the world's longest joke? Maybe she was testing me. Each excuse I made crumbled as quickly as it formed, but I clung to them anyway. They were the only shield I had against the truth creeping closer with every passing hour. When midnight came, the station was almost empty. I curled into myself on the bench, shivering under the harsh glow of the overhead lights. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I refused to cry. If I cried, it meant I was alone. If I cried, it meant she had abandoned me. And that was something I wasn't ready to accept. So I sat there, wide-eyed and stiff, telling myself she'd appear any second now, her voice cutting through the silence, scolding me for doubting her. But she never came. A janitor sweeping the floors noticed me sometime after midnight. He was an older man with kind eyes and a back bent from years of labor. He crouched in front of me, asked me where my parents were. I told him my sister would be back soon, though my voice trembled. He looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand at the time, and he offered me a piece of bread. My stomach twisted with hunger, so I took it, whispering a shaky thank you. He didn't press me further, just sat near me for a while, as if to keep me from disappearing into the dark. That night was the first of many I spent at the station. Each morning, I woke up stiff and cold, my eyes searching the crowd for her face. Each evening, I told myself tomorrow she would come, and each night, when the benches emptied and the silence grew heavier, I felt a piece of that hope die. I was 12 years old when my sister left me at that train station. For weeks, I believed she'd return. For months, I convinced myself there was some reason, some explanation that would make sense. But as the seasons changed and the years began to stretch, I learned a harder truth. Sometimes, the people you love most don't come back. Sometimes, they leave you behind and never look over their shoulder. And sometimes, the betrayal comes not from a stranger, but from the one person you thought would always protect you. The days after my sister left me blurred into one another like smeared ink on paper. I stopped counting them because numbers only reminded me of how long it had been since I'd last seen her face. At first, I clung to hope, stubbornly refusing to leave the station, afraid she might return and not find me. Every time a girl with dark hair walked by, my heart lurched. Every laugh that sounded even slightly like hers made me crane my neck. But as the weeks stretched into months, the hope that once kept me standing began to rot inside me. Hunger gnawed at me, loneliness pressed against my ribs, and I realized that waiting was no longer enough. I had to learn how to survive. The janitor, who had given me bread on that first night, became my quiet guardian. His name was Rafik, though he insisted I call him Uncle. He never asked too many questions, perhaps because he saw the answers written in my eyes. He didn't try to take me home, didn't push me towards some official who might lock me away in a place for abandoned children. Instead, he taught me how to make myself small, how to live in the gaps where no one looked. The world doesn't care for strays, he said once, his voice heavy with truth. So you must learn to care for yourself. During the day, I began to run errands for Vendoff scaring bags, delivering small packages across the platforms. They gave me coins. Sometimes food. It wasn't much, but it kept me from starving. At night, I curled up on benches, in corners, sometimes in the storage closet Rafik left open for me. The station became both my prison and my shelter. I knew every crack in the floor, every schedule of the arriving trains, every sound the walls made as they breathed with the comings and goings of strangers. But survival wasn't just about food and shelter. It was about hardening myself, building walls inside my chest. At 12, I learned lessons most children are spared, that kindness is rare, that trust can shatter in an instant, and that family doesn't always mean safety. My sister's laughter, the memory of it, was the cruelest ghost. It echoed in my ears as I lay awake at night, her face flashing before my eyes every time I saw another pair of siblings walking hand in hand through the station. Sometimes, I hated her with every bone in my body. Other times, I missed her so much that the ache felt like a sickness. Years began to carve themselves into me. By 14, I had left the station behind. Rafik encouraged me to move on, telling me there was nothing left for me in that place except ghosts. With his help, I found work at a small roadside eatery, washing dishes in exchange for meals and a thin mattress in a back storeroom. The owner, a man named Shakir, was stern but fair. He didn't care where I came from, only that I showed up every day and worked hard. I threw myself into the rhythm of scrubbing pots, sweeping floors, serving water to tired travelers who stopped for tea. My hands blistered, my back ached, but I was alive, and I had learned to take pride in that. Even so, the nights were the hardest. The storeroom was dim and smelled of onions and oil, but it was quiet, too quiet. Without the constant hum of the station, the silence left me alone with my thoughts. I would close my eyes and see her face again, hear her promise, wait, right here, I'll be back in a minute. That promise became a knife, one that twisted deeper the older I grew. By 15, I stopped waiting. I told myself she had meant to leave me, that she had chosen to walk away. Believing that hurt less than imagining she might have searched and failed to find me? Over time, I built a kind of armor. I learned to move through the world without expecting kindness. I learned to smile when customers spoke to me, even when inside I felt like stone. I learned that money meant power, even in small amounts. Slowly, I saved every coin I could, stashing them in a cracked tin beneath my mattress. Each clink of a coin felt like a step away from the child who had once waited on a station platform for a sister who never returned. By 17, I had enough saved to leave the eatery and move to another town. I didn't say goodbye to Shakir, he wasn't the type who liked sentiment. I simply packed my small bag, took my tin of coins, and walked away. I traveled by bus. The first time I had left on my own since that night. As the bus pulled out of the town, I watched the road stretch ahead of me like a promise. Not the kind of promise my sister had broken, but one I could make to myself, that I would never again let anyone decide my fate for me in the new town. I found work as an assistant in a workshop that repaired radios and later mobile phones. The owner, a wiry man named Imran, had sharp eyes that missed nothing. He quickly noticed how fast I learned, how steady my hands were. For the first time, I felt useful beyond cleaning or carrying. Fixing things became my new language. Each broken wire, each shattered circuit was a puzzle I could mend. In repairing objects, I felt a quiet control over the chaos of my own life. If only people could be fixed as easily as machines, I sometimes thought. If only my sister could be repaired and returned to me like a broken radio. But people are not machines, and forgiveness is not solder and wired. By the time I turned 20, I had carved out a life that no longer felt borrowed. I rented a small room, barely big enough for a bed and a wooden chair, but it was mine. I cooked my own meals, paid my own bills, built friendships with people who didn't know anything about the boy abandoned at a train station. I never told anyone the full story. It was easier to let them assume I was just another drifter, another orphan who had grown up on the edges of society. The truth was too heavy to share, too sharp to hand over to anyone else. Still, no matter how far I traveled or how many years passed, my sister's shadow followed me, in dreams. She returned, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always reaching out her hand. In those dreams, I always hesitated before taking it. When I woke, the ache of her absence was as strong as it had been the first night. The wound never fully healed. Chapter 2 of my life was survival, transformation, and escape. But beneath it all, the same question pulsed like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. Why had she left me? And even more haunting, if I ever saw her again, what would I do? By the time I turned 22, I thought I had managed to bury the past beneath layers of ordinary life. I had a small workshop of my own by then, one I had earned after years of learning under Imran. The shop wasn't much, just a narrow space, with peeling paint, a workbench cluttered with wires, screws, and the constant hum of radios or mobile phones waiting to be brought back to life. Customers came and went, leaving behind their broken devices and bits of conversation that drifted through the room like background noise. I told myself this was enough, that the boy abandoned at a train station was gone, replaced by a man who no longer needed anyone. But the truth is, no matter how much I built, how many coins I saved, The emptiness never left me. It just grew. Quieter, waiting for the day it would wake again. That day came without warning. On an afternoon drenched in sunlight, I had been bent over a radio, its screws spread like tiny silver stars across the workbench, when I heard a voice outside. At? First, it was just a murmur among many, part of the market noise that always filled the street. But then I heard my name. Not the name customers used, but my real name, the one I hadn't heard in years. The one my sister used to call out when we were children running through alleyways. My hands froze mid-motion. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. Some trick of memory. But then, I heard it again. Sharper this time, trembling with urgency. I looked up, and the air seemed to split open. There she was, standing just beyond the doorway, her figure framed by the blinding light of the afternoon sun. My sister, 10 years older, thinner, her face carved with lines of grief I didn't remember. Her hair, once shiny and full, was tied back loosely, strands escaping in messy curls. Her eyes, those same eyes I had trusted more than anything, were red, swollen with tears. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost, and maybe she was, because I felt like one. For a long, aching moment, neither of us spoke. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the world around me. My hands trembled over the workbench, the screwdriver slipping from my grip. Part of me wanted to run to her, to close the distance and bury my face against her shoulder like I used to when I was scared. But another part of me, the part that had been forged in loneliness and survival, wanted to turn away, to shut the door, to let her vanish again. She stepped inside, her voice breaking as she whispered my name. "It's really you," she said, as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she reached out a trembling hand toward me. I didn't move. My chest tightened, a storm of anger and longing clashing so violently inside me that I could barely breathe. All the years I had spent imagining this moment, preparing for it, and now that it was here, I was paralyzed. "I looked for you," she said quickly, her words tumbling over one another. "For years, I searched everywhere. I went back to the station. I asked people. I thought you were gone, that you had." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. The sound of it clawed at me, dragging me back to the boy I had been, waiting on that cold bench, whispering promises into the air. Rage surged through me, sharp and hot. "You left me," I said, my voice hoarse, unfamiliar. "You left me there like I was nothing. Do you have any idea what you did to me?" The words tore out of me before I could stop them, years of silence breaking all at once. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the workbench, afraid I would shatter if I let go. She fell to her knees right there on the floor of my shop. "I was stupid," she cried. "I thought it was just a joke. Just a silly game. I didn't think you would wait so long. I went back for you, but you were gone. I searched. I swear I did. But I failed you. I failed you, and I've carried that guilt every day since." Her voice cracked under the weight of her words, and I could see she wasn't lying. The pain in her eyes was raw, the kind that can't be faked. But pain doesn't erase betrayal. Her tears didn't erase the nights I went hungry, the years I spent building myself out of nothing. I wanted to tell her all of it too, pour out the loneliness, the fear, the endless ache of abandonment, but my throat closed around the words. Instead, I just stared at her, my body rigid, my heart warring with itself. She crawled closer, her hands clutching at my knees. "Please," she whispered. "Please forgive me. I've missed you every day. I've prayed for this chance. Prayed that I could see you again, just once. I don't expect you to forget, but please, please, let me be your sister again." Her desperation filled the room, and I hated how much it pulled at me. This was the sister who had once braided my hair clumsily, who had stolen fruit from vendors just to make me laugh, who had held my hand when we crossed the street. This was the same girl who had also walked away, leaving me behind with nothing but her broken promise. She was both of those people, and I didn't know which one to believe. I rose from my chair slowly, her hands falling away as I stepped back. My voice was steady this time, though my heart was anything but. "You don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened." You don't get to erase 10 years with tears. My words sliced through the air, and she flinched. But I wasn't finished.
I don't know if I can forgive you.
I don't know if I even want to. You left me to survive alone, and I did. Without you! Her tears streamed silently down her face now, her sobs quieter, as if the weight of my words had pressed her into silence. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. I understand, she whispered. I deserve your anger. I deserve your hate. But I'll never stop trying to make it right, even if it takes the rest of my life. I turned away then, unable to look at her any longer. My hands trembled as I picked up the screwdriver again, pretending to focus on the broken radio. But inside, I was breaking all over again. She was here after 10 years. She was here, and I had no idea what to do with her. That night, after she left, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small room. My chest ached with a heaviness I hadn't felt in years. Her voice echoed in my head. Her tears burned in my memory. For the first time since I was 12, the walls I had built around myself began to crack. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't know if I wanted to let her back in, but I didn't know if I could live with sending her away either. The days after my sister's sudden return were heavy with silence. She didn't vanish again, though a part of me expected her to. Instead, she came back to the shop each morning, sitting quietly on the wooden stool by the door, her presence a constant weight. She didn't push me to speak. She didn't demand forgiveness. She just sat there, waiting, sometimes with food wrapped in newspaper, sometimes with nothing at all but her own fragile hope. Customers noticed her. Of course people always notice a woman who looks like she's carrying the ruins of her world on her shoulders. But no one asked questions. Maybe they assumed she was my wife, or a relative. I didn't correct them. I didn't call her my sister. I didn't call her anything. At night, I wrestled with memories. The boy in me still cried on that station bench, shivering under the glow of the lights, waiting for the one person who never came. The man in me clenched his jaw, insisting those wounds were old scars, not worth reopening. But every morning, when I unlocked the door to my shop and found her already waiting, her eyes lifting with a mixture of fear and relief, the walls I had built trembled. She was stubborn, just like me. One evening, as I packed away my tools, she finally spoke more than a few words. I want to tell you everything, she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the hum of the street outside. Not to excuse what I did, but so you'll understand. I didn't answer right away. I tightened the last screw into the radio, placed it on the shelf, and then leaned against the workbench with my arms crossed. Go ahead, I said, though my tone was flat. Her hands twisted in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. That day, she began, her voice shaking. I thought it would be funny. I was 16. I was stupid. I left you there, thinking I'd circle back, jump out, scare you, and we'd laugh. But when I came back, she swallowed hard. You weren't there. I searched the whole station. I screamed your name until my throat hurt. I begged people to help me, but no one had seen you. It was like you had disappeared in minutes. I panicked. I thought maybe you had gotten on a train. I ran home, hoping you were there, but you weren't. And by the time I went back again, it was too late. Days passed, weeks passed. I went to the police, but they dismissed me. They said children run away all the time. Our parents, she choked on the word, they didn't care enough to search. So I kept looking alone. I never stopped. I never gave up. But everywhere I went, it was as if you had been swallowed by the earth. Her words cut through me like glass. I wanted to scream that she was lying, that she had chosen to abandon me. But the rawness in her voice, the way her shoulders shook as she spoke, told me she was telling the truth. Still, the anger burned inside me. You think that makes it better? I asked coldly. You think that changes the nights I went hungry? The years I spent without you? Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. No, she whispered. I don't expect it to. I know I destroyed your childhood. I know I'll never deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know I didn't just walk away and forget you. Losing you ruined me too. Her words lodged in my chest, but I refused to let them settle. You had a home, I said bitterly. I didn't. You had choices. I had none. Whatever guilt you carry doesn't erase what happened to me. My voice cracked, despite my efforts to sound strong. She flinched, but didn't move. That night, she didn't follow me home. She stayed behind in the shop long after I had gone. Her figure still in the window when I looked back once from the corner of the street. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself her pain wasn't mine to heal. But the truth was, I hadn't expected her to carry her own scars. I had spent so long imagining her as heartless, uncaring, free of the weight I bore. Seeing her broken forced me to confront something I didn't want to face, that we had both been victims of that day, even if in different ways. Over the next week, she continued to come. Sometimes she told me small stories about the years I had missed jobs she had taken, the nights she had gone hungry too, the nights she had prayed until dawn for a glimpse of me. Other times, she sat in silence, her presence enough to stir a restless ache in me. Slowly, against my will, I began to speak back. At first, only small replies, single words, then longer sentences. One day, I told her about Rafiq, the janitor, who had kept me alive in those first months. Another day, I described the years at the eatery, the blisters on my hands from endless scrubbing. She listened with tears in her eyes, never interrupting, never trying to lessen my pain. It was strange how the act of speaking the truth out loud, truth I had locked away for years, felt. Both like ripping open an old wound and finally letting it breathe. I hadn't realized how much I had needed someone to hear it, to understand it. And she, despite being the cause of it all, was the only person who could truly understand. One evening, when the market outside had gone quiet and the lambs cast long shadows on the floor, she reached for my hand. I almost pulled away, but something in her gaze held me. I can't give you back those years, she whispered. I can't undo what I did, but I can be here now. If you let me. Her hand was warm, trembling against mine. My throat tightened, and for a long time, I said nothing. Part of me screamed to reject her, to hold on to the anger that had protected me all these years. But another part, the tired, aching part, longed for the comfort of family, for the sister I had lost. Finally, I whispered, I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Her fingers curled around mine, and she nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Then I'll wait, she said simply. And for the first time in 10 years, I didn't pull away. Time has a strange way of softening even the sharpest wounds. In the weeks that followed, my sister kept coming to my shop every morning, sitting on that same stool by the door. She didn't push me, didn't beg anymore, didn't even ask for forgiveness. Instead, she simply stayed, quietly helping where she could, sweeping the floor, handing me tools, or running small errands for the customers. At first, I thought she was only doing it to prove something, to convince me of her sincerity. But as the days stretched into months, I began to see it differently. This was not a performance. This was her way of showing me that she meant every word she had said. She wanted to be here, to be part of my life again, even if I never gave her the forgiveness she longed for. Slowly, I adjusted to her presence. It felt strange, after so many years of being alone, to share space with someone who knew me before I had been hardened by survival. She remembered things I had forgotten, the way I used to hum under my breath when I was nervous, the fact that I hated onions, the little scar on my left elbow from when I had fallen off my bicycle as a child. Hearing those memories was like opening an old chest in the attic, the dust rising into the air and making it hard to breathe. For so long, I had convinced myself I was no one's brother, no one's son, just a man who had made himself from nothing. And yet here she was, reminding me of who I had been before the world turned cold. There were nights when I still woke up from dreams of the station, the endless waiting, the echo of her promise, the pain of her absence. Those nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, anger clawing at me all over again. But in the mornings, when I saw her sitting there, her head tilted slightly as she greeted me with a tentative smile. The anger didn't burn as hot as it once had. It was as if the fire inside me was slowly running out of fuel. One evening, after the shop had closed, we walked together through the market. The air was filled with the smell of spices and smoke from food stalls. and the sky above glowed in shades of crimson and gold. She walked a step behind me, as if afraid to take the lead again. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever think about going back to the station?" Her voice trembled with the weight of the question. The thought had haunted me for years. The station was the place where my life had split into two halves, before and after. I had never gone back. It felt like sacred ground, cursed and holy at the same time. Sometimes, I admitted, but I don't know if I could stand it. She nodded, her eyes glistening. Maybe we could go together? Not to erase what happened, but to face it. To finally put it down. 4 days afterward, I wrestled with the idea. Part of me recoiled at the thought of standing in that place again, reliving the moment she had walked away. But another part of me, the part that had begun to accept her presence, wondered if it was the only way to truly close the wound. And so, one Sunday morning, when the streets were quiet and the air still carried the coolness of dawn, I told her, "Let's go!" The train station looked both familiar and strange after all these years. The walls were older, dirtier, and the vendors had changed. But the sounds, the screech of wheels, the voices echoing through the loudspeakers were the same. My chest tightened as I stepped onto the platform, memories slamming into me with merciless force. I saw myself at 12, clutching my backpack, scanning the crowd with wide, desperate eyes. My legs shook, and for a moment, I thought I wouldn't be able to move. But then I felt her hand slip gently into mine. I almost pulled away, but something stopped me. Her grip was soft, trembling, as if she was afraid I would reject her touch. Together, we walked to the spot where she had left me. The bench was still there, though worn and chipped with age. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tight. "This is where everything ended," I said quietly. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "And maybe this is where everything can begin again." I sank onto the bench, my hands shaking as I pressed them against my knees. The ghosts of my younger self seemed to sit beside me, eyes wide and empty, waiting endlessly for someone who would never come. Tears blurred my vision, and for the first time in years, I let them fall freely. My sister sat beside me, her own tears streaming silently down her cheeks. For a long time, we said nothing, just sat there with the weight of the past pressing down on us. Finally, I turned to her. "Hated you," I confessed, my voice raw. "For so long, I hated you. I told myself you didn't care, that you had left me on purpose. It was the only way I could survive, by turning you into a villain in my mind. But seeing you now, hearing you, I know that's not the truth. You made a mistake, a terrible one, but you didn't abandon me out of cruelty. And maybe, I've been holding on to the hate for too long." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'll be sorry until the day I die." I reached for her hand this time, surprising even myself. Her fingers tightened around mine, warm and trembling. "I can't give you back those years," I said softly, "and I can't forget what happened. But maybe I can forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this weight anymore. I want to live, not just survive." Her sob broke into a laugh, a sound of relief so raw it pierced me. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in 10 years, I let her. We sat there together, two broken people in the very place where everything had fallen apart, finally piecing ourselves back together. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It didn't make the years of pain disappear, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in so long: peace. For the first time since that day at the station, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And as the trains roared past us, carrying strangers to new destinations, I realized that life was giving me a choice. Not to forget, but to move forward. Not to erase the scars, but to carry them with someone who had been lost and found again. That day, I walked away from the station not as the boy who had been abandoned, but as a man who had chosen to forgive. My sister walked beside me, her hand still holding mine. And for the first time in 10 long years, I felt like I was finally going home. Asterisk, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful, Stories